Now, the next thing I want to do is kind of start to wipe the slate clean here. So let's get rid of all that. Another thing I want to do is just get rid of that. I'll use the star right there. So that's just going to mean that I'm importing everything from the ZIO library. And now what I want to do is start showing how we interact with things that were not necessarily meant for ZIO. I'm trying to think of a good way to word that, but that's one possible way to say that. And what I mean by that is when we have code like this where we say, I want to use the Scala standard in object right there and its readline function. So what I want to do in this example, let me just type this out. I want to prompt somebody and say, what is your name? Like that. But the problem is this code is not meant for working with ZIO. So what I'd really like to do here is say, I want to be able to prompt for a name like that. And then down here, I want to create a run value. So this is our ZIO run value. And then I would like to be able to say something like that. But the problem is that this code right here is not meant for ZIO. This is just some plain old Scala code. So if I try to do that, we're going to get some kind of error messages down here. First one is that standard in is not found. And that is because I need to import scala.io.standardin. That. And then the error messages are going to get a little worse. And I'm not too terribly worried about these error messages because I knew that this was coming. So again, I'm not wording this particularly well, but what I want to be able to do is I want to use this type of code in a ZIO application so I can prompt a user and say, hey, user, what is your name? Of course, there is the console library in ZIO, so I could use that. But the way I'm approaching this is I'm saying, if console didn't exist, how could I possibly use code like this inside of a ZIO application? And the way you do that, and there's a couple of different ways in this particular example that you could do this, but I'm going to use one way. And what we do is we say we want to attempt to do this following code right here. So we say, ZIO, I want to attempt to do this following code right here. So again, this code that I have highlighted is plain old Scala code. It doesn't really fit well in the ZIO environment by itself. So what you have to do is you wrap it inside of ZIO attempt, as I just showed right there, and that converts this code that I have highlighted into a ZIO value. And in fact, if I come up here, I can start filling in that value just like I did in previous videos. And again, here I'm reading from the console. So this is very similar to the last example. So I'll put those types there again, RE and A. And then I ask the same question I did before. When you look at this code right here that I have highlighted, what environment does that code require? And the answer is that it's none. So again, that can be any. Second parameter, what is the potential error type? And again, it turns out that if you dug into the documentation for the readline function, it can throw an exception. I can't remember what it is, probably an IO exception, but again, I'm just going to call it a throwable like I did before. And then the third question is, what type does this code return? So if you look at this code right here, or specifically this code that's inside of ZIO.attempt, what data type does this code return? So readline is prompting a user for their name. And again, if you looked at the documentation, you'd find out that readline returns a string. So that's the answer for that parameter right there, is that that's a string. And now if I haven't made any mistakes, I can save that and come down here. And it's prompting me for my name, so I can type in Alvin. And this starts to get a little wonky with that watch option. So I am going to kill this down here and probably move things around a little bit. So let's kill that. Clear everything. The problem with interactive programs and that watch option is that things start to get a little weird as we build more and more into our application. So let me just put that over there like that. Clear that again. And now the only thing I'm going to do is run it like that. So I'll run it one more time and then say Alvin. And there we go. And now the reason I did this over here is for what we're doing next. So what I want to do next is find a way to say, well, after I prompt for the name, I want to have something like val name equals prompt for name. And then if we were doing plain old Scala code, we would say something like that. So this code is not exactly going to work, but that's what I want to do is I want to have some way of printing out this information. Or another way you might say that I want to do this is I want to create a print name function, and then I want to print that like that. So that tells me I want to create a print name function. So that's what I'm going to start doing over here. And this is going to be a print name function. It's going to take name as an input parameter. That's going to be a string. And then it's going to do something over here. So again, we're not working in the plain old Scala environment. We're working with the ZIO environment. So if I were writing Scala 2 code, I would say print line and name like that. And again, I'm ignoring the fact that the console object exists in ZIO, that object right there. I'm ignoring that that exists, and we're basically writing our own console object here. So I want to try to get print name to work in the ZIO environment. And the way we do that is we could use attempt right here, but another way we could do that is also ZIO.succeed. And we wrap print line in that right there. So we take our old print line statement like that, and we wrap it in the ZIO succeed. And that helps lift that code that I have highlighted into our ZIO environment. And kind of an interesting thing here is if we were to try to fill in that type again. So again, we had R, E, and A. I'm not going to make this as slow as I have in the past, but now we're looking at this code here, and specifically we're looking at that code inside of here, and we're saying, what are these parameters? So again, the environment, we don't have any environment requirements. We don't need anything. So we call that any. And this part is interesting here, the error type. Because I'm saying succeed, I am guaranteeing to the ZIO interpreter, hey, don't worry, this code can't fail. It will always succeed. So here where I had a throwable because I was using attempt. Attempt is a way of saying attempt to do this code and it can throw an exception. This succeed function is saying, don't worry about anything inside here. It's not going to fail. It will always succeed. And because it will always succeed, we're not going to have an error value. And when you don't have an error value, you use the Scala type nothing for that right there. So that's a huge difference between attempt right here and succeed right here. And then here, the last type is the return type from this code right here. So if we dig into here and we look at the return type from a print line statement, that's going to be unit, just like it was before. So again, we make that unit. And then you can see that we have filled in the ZIO type right there for this new function. So I'm going to save that, and we can try to compile this. It's not going to work. And what's happening, if you look at that error message and the line numbers over here, this is failing over here. So the way this works in the ZIO world is you don't write code like this. You don't have code on separate lines like this. Instead, what you want to do is you want to say, well, I want to prompt for the username like that. And then in a simple use case like this, you'll say flat map. And actually, I kind of just gave that away. Anytime you're thinking and then in your mind, the words and then, anytime you're thinking that in the ZIO world, you could be thinking flat map. So what I'm saying right here is I want to prompt for the person's name. And then what I want to do is I want to print their name. And the way we do this is the name is going to come out of here. So when I prompt for the name right here, the name is going to be this string that comes out of here. So I'm going to prompt for the name, and then I have the name from this prompting right there. I have the name, and then I can print the name right there. So this is the way we write that code in ZIO. And I'm going to show you more ways to write this code as we go along, but that's a way to write that. And also, I want to be clear that there's nothing special about the name right here. So this could be called the name, and then we would change that to the name like that. So let me save that right there and come back over here, and we will compile that and run it. And we type that in. So it got the name that I typed in, and then it printed it out right there. So what I'm trying to do is a couple of things right here. So number one, I'm trying to take some baby steps and show you how things work in ZIO. And specifically, I'm trying to show that when we need to reach back into the Scala environment, or any other library that's not intended for use in ZIO, what we can do is wrap calls like this one that I have highlighted right here inside of attempt. If you know it can fail, then we wrap it in attempt. And if we know that it cannot fail, then we put that inside of succeed like that. And again, this is two ways of lifting these values from other environments into the ZIO environment. That's the first couple of things I wanted to show. And then the next thing I wanted to show is, again, this code that I had right here, is that when you want to do things in sequential order and you find yourself saying, what I want to do is I want to prompt for the name and then I want to print the name. Whenever you start thinking and then, you start thinking about the flat map method. So every ZIO value, like prompt for name and even print name, is going to have a flat map method available to it. And then what happens, again, prompt for name returns a string value. So then inside these curly braces right here, all I'm doing is saying, I'm going to give that string value the name, and then I'm going to use that when I call print name right here. So I'm passing that into here. So those are some of the keys that I'm trying to show in this example here. I also went through and showed how to describe these ZIO data types again. And I covered this one in the previous video, so I'm not going to talk about that too much anymore. What was new in this one was when we're saying that this code right here cannot fail, then the error parameter, this E parameter right here, what you do is you just use nothing for that one right there. And this is the Scala nothing type. So when you use any right here, that's saying this code that I have highlighted does not have any environment requirements. And then when you use the nothing type right here, what you're saying there is that this code cannot fail, and therefore I just use nothing right there. And actually, I'm going to show you a hack real quick that I use in some code sometimes. So what you could do in Scala is you could say, I want to create a new type called no environment, and I'm going to say that's equal to the any type. I'm going to create a second type, and I'm going to say that this one is called cannot fail, and that's going to equal the nothing type, like that. And then I want to use those over here. So I just want to mention that this is something that most people do not do. I'm just doing this as part of teaching here. And also, I think that these names here are more meaningful than these names over here. So what I want to do here is say, I don't have any environment requirements, so I'm going to call that no env. And then I'm going to say this cannot fail. So then we can use that type right there instead of nothing. So I'm also showing you a little bit of information about types as well. But let's come back over here and run that again and just show you that this does work. And now we'll just type Al and we say that that works. So again, to me, no environment is more meaningful than any, and cannot fail is more meaningful than nothing. But these are the standard types that people use, so I'm going to go back and use those standard types. I just wanted to show you some things that you can do in Scala. And again, you can create more meaningful types like this if you want to. But for now, I'm going to get rid of that because that's not standard in the ZIO world, so I'll just go ahead and delete that.